Hi everybody, welcome into the Irish NFL show. St. Patrick's Day, happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody watching. Going to welcome in first of all Colin Sláinte, man. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
How's it going? It's a great day. It's a great day.
It's a very good day. We've got Brian as well from Dublin. Hello, Brian. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, guys. So, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, I decided to go with a bit of blue and red for the New York Giants.
I thought you were going to say something else there. All good.
No,
all good.
I knew you thought that. No, I wasn't going down that road.
Ironically, I was going to welcome in Mark, but Mark's disappeared. Before we bring him in, just to make everybody aware, big guest today. But first off, this is 6 o'clock in Ireland, so if anything does happen between 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock, we're sorry, but, be grand. It's grand. It's St. Patrick's Day. Welcome in to Ireland's own, I guess now, Paul Pabst. Paul, welcome in, man. Welcome in.
This is great. Now, I got to warn you guys, it's 2 o'clock in New York. I'm usually into my cups already, so I've already delayed my drinking for an hour. I might be a little faulty, but let's go. I'm ready.
It's all good. It's honestly, Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on, man, on the day that it is St. Patrick's Day. We had you on for the Super Bowl episode, and honestly, I felt horrible because we talked for 20 minutes, and I felt like when we originally talked for the first time, we could have talked for 2 or 3 hours under a fire somewhere in Tipperary somewhere. So I apologise. You have your moment now at the biggest day of the year in Ireland. It's your show. You're very welcome on.
I think we could have done better. I think J.J. Watt is unavailable. He's a big Ginn fan, but maybe next year we'll get J.J. on the show.
Let's get J.J. Watt on the show, Colin. It sounds good, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. JJ appears to like the sunny climate. So it might be difficult to get him to appear. Hopefully, we're back in person doing this in Dublin. But you'd be welcome to join us for that.
JJ is pretty connected to Dublin and Guinness. He's been there twice. I would say about 4 years ago. Guinness, he and I think 2 of his brothers and 2 of his high school friends, after the season, they took a 10-day trip around Ireland. And he actually sent me a note. We know each other from his appearance on the Dan Patrick Show. And he goes, we want to get a tour of Guinness. I was wondering, can you get us the insider tour? I'm like, well, you're J.J. Watt. They'll probably bend over backwards for you. And we called over to some people over at Guinness, and they brought J.J. Watt in and his brothers and a couple of his friends. And not only did they do that, they made a special 99 beer for him. They made a label, and he didn't know it was coming, and I didn't know it was coming, but they said they had a special treat for him. So he gets up to this tasting room where I think if you've been to the Guinness storehouse, they teach you how to pour a proper pint. And after doing that, they rolled out like 12-pack of special J.J. Watt logoed Guinness beer. And he sent me a note. He goes, I almost got emotional. He goes, playing in the NFL is something he thought he'd do, but being at Guinness with his brothers and his high school pals and having a beer with his name on it, he still has them. He drank a few, but he saved them, and he's a big Guinness fan.
Paul, we had Alex Mack on here on the show a number of months ago, and his wife is actually from Dublin, and he also touched on the special treatment he had when he went around a few distilleries and obviously the Guinness factory as well. So must be a common theme for NFL players coming over to Ireland.
Well, I think, I know we're going to talk football, but I've been to Ireland about 4 times, and all 4 times I went with different people. And one of the things they all want to do is go to the Guinness brewery, the Guinness storehouse. And I think if you live in Ireland, you take it for granted. It'd be like the Statue of Liberty in New York or whatever, Wrigley Field in Chicago, where I'm from. You take for granted when it's right down the street from you. But people in America, it's really a destination. And it's something you kind of want to, especially if you're a beer drinker, you want to check it off your list. And it really doesn't disappoint. And I'm sure you guys have been there before. But the first time I went to Guinness, and to go upstairs to the Gravity Bar, which has the entire view of Dublin, and you kind of just sit there for an hour or two. It's not like you run upstairs, you look, and then you run back downstairs like a lot of tourist destinations. And I can remember just sitting at the Gravity Bar, and I could see every piece of Dublin in the different neighborhoods. And you can see the water, which you can't really see from certain areas of town. It's fantastic. And every time I go back there, it doesn't lose its luster.
You can see Croke Park up in the North Pole, and you can see the Wicklow Mountains down in the south from it. But I think the 2 most paid-for tourist destinations in Ireland, that you have to pay an entrance fee to, is number 1 by a million miles is the Guinness Storehouse, and number 2 is the Jameson Distillery. I don't want to say that puts or casts aspersions on Ireland and the culture of alcohol, shall we say? But it's notable, shall we say?
Well, we bounced around last time I was in Ireland. We went to a place called Teeling Whiskey, and I'm sure you guys know Teeling. I didn't really know much about it, and I think when people go there, they learn there's more to it than just those two things, Jameson and Guinness. And it's once you get there a few times and you learn more about Dublin, and also getting out of Dublin. I went to Galway, and I thought it was fantastic. The music in Galway and the seafood. I didn't know much about Galway before I went there. I heard of it. I knew it was on the West Coast, but I really I just knew it was small, but it was not as small as I thought. And the food was really good. I really enjoyed the seafood in Galway. But one of the things I thought about Galway that was special was seemed to be a lot more music, a lot more places that had live music. And what's different about music in Ireland, again, I'm telling you guys stuff that you know, but maybe people here don't, is that there's not necessarily a stage for the band. The band may be 4 guys from the neighborhood who take a booth and just start playing. And that's not what we're used to here in the States with bands. Usually there's some type of stage or a setup and they plug in and got all this equipment. We were in Galway and we're just going to the pubs, and you'd walk in and there'd be 4 people with, different types of musical instruments just sitting at like a corner, not really in some type of introduction. I'm like, are they even like hired to be here, or did they just show up with their instruments? I love it.
Paul, I'm going to talk for every Northerner here in the sense, have you ever been to Belfast or the North at all? And secondly, for me, as somebody, from Northern Ireland or from the North in that sense, Galway is the best night out I've ever had in Ireland. You're spot on. The best night out. Like, just, you walk into any bar, you feel like you've been there for 10 years. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and again, it's a good walking town. You don't have to take cabs everywhere. You could walk around. I haven't been to Northern Ireland yet. The other places I've been in a little town called Ennis. We were just driving and we stopped for the night, and it was cool. It was kind of like this medieval little downtown area, central village area. And then the other cool thing we did, we stopped for a night at a place called Dromoland Castle, which I would guess is about an hour south of the Shannon Airport. And it was unbelievable. It felt like a time machine. The Dromoland Castle it felt like the 1800s. They had falconry. Most places have like a spa and hot tubs. You could go out with a falcon and learn how to do falconry. And then they had this golf course at the Dromoland Castle, and I'm a pretty average golfer, and that's stretching it. And they asked me, like, want to go out and golf? I'm like, this course is so beautiful. I would not ruin, this country and this golf course with my golf game. And I actually passed because it was so beautiful. The flowers and the greens were just gorgeous. I'm like, I'm not going to hack this up and then get on a plane and leave this course a disaster. But it was beautiful.
Paul, it's interesting. You're talking about Teelings and Guinness. I'm in Dublin 8, and Michael has been. Teelings is literally around the corner from me, right. And Guinness, I can walk there in about two and a bit minutes, I would say. So I'm right in the heart of that. But you, not only were you in Guinness, I believe you've been to Keogh's, which is a fabulous watering hole in Dublin. Can you tell us a bit about your experiences in Keogh's?
Yeah, about 3 years ago, we were there for a thing at Guinness called Meatopia. And it was a small little event where it was open air chefs cooking over open fire. And it was like little stations with different foods. And then it was at the Guinness Open Gate area, which is the back of Guinness. It almost looks like a loading dock. And you guys know this, but it's the experimental brewery of Guinness, where they make all the new beers, try different things. I mean, one of them had like pine straw in it. The other had like sea salt. Really great. And you spend 2 days at hold on, I need a sip. And we're back. And so we got to spend a couple days at Meatopia. And one of the guys we were there with was Adam Richman. I think you guys know him. He hosts Man vs. Food back in the day. It's pretty well known. Anyone who's into food and the drink knows Adam Richman. And I know his show played in Ireland just the past couple of years, Man vs. Food. So afterwards, he goes, you got to go to Keogh's. And I'd heard of it, but we didn't go there on my last trip. And it's kind of like this road, and you guys know it, where it comes around, and it's not really, it's pedestrian friendly, but it's not car friendly. And everyone just spills outside at happy hour and all evening outside. And we're standing out there, and the sun's up because it's summertime or springtime. And Adam Richman introduced me to this tall guy, and his name was Niall. And I introduced myself, and he's like, "What do you do for a living?" And I tell him, and I didn't even ask him what he did for a living, kind of rude of me. But as we're standing there talking to this guy, Niall, he's really nice. He's Irish, and he's asking me about different American sports and what I do for a living and blah, 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 blah. I noticed that there was just every once in a while, a girl would walk up and ask to meet him or ask for a picture. And it was really, I know he's a good looking guy. He's not that good looking. It wasn't Cristiano Ronaldo here. And then I noticed there was a line of girls waiting to meet him. And every 10 seconds in our conversation, like, excuse me, Paul, 1 second. And he'd turn and take a picture. And I go, what the hell do you do for a living? He goes, my name's Niall Breslin. I'm the host of the Irish Voice. And he goes, I used to be in a band. I used to be a rugby player, I think. And well, I had no idea who this guy was, of course. And but there was such a line of people to meet him. And it was really fun. And we talked a lot about American sports and Irish sports. And we've kept in touch ever since. But I did not know that he was famous in Ireland at all when I met him. And he's good friends with Adam Richmond. But I'd never been so ignored by women in my entire life. And I've been ignored by a lot of women in a lot of countries. But when you stand next to Niall Breslin at Keogh's at 7 o'clock on a Friday, you're a nobody. Nobody.
Paul, when you were on for the Super Bowl, you did mention potentially coming on for St. Patrick's Day, and it's great to have you. A day in which you see as significant a new market every year. Any stories or any background info you want to tell us about how you tend to enjoy the experience in the
St.
States?
Patrick's Day?
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in the South Side of Chicago. It's a very Irish area. My family is one side of my family is completely Irish. My mom's last name is Carey. Her ancestors are Campbell, and so they're from the County Cork. Ireland, St. Patrick's Day in Chicago is an appointment. You don't even think about missing it. You really plan your whole week around it. If it's a Wednesday, if it's a Saturday, whatever it may be. South Side of Chicago, where I'm from, is a heavy Irish community. And I also went to a Catholic high school, which was very heavy Irish. We would leave school and, I'm talking high school, and go down to the bars in Chicago and make an appointment to go down there. And then even in college, you go to whatever Irish pub. But in Chicago, they have a thing in Chicago where the river, there's a big, huge lake, Lake Michigan. And then this little river cuts through the heart of Chicago. And years ago, the mayor was named Richard J. Daley. He was a very powerful mayor in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And he wanted to dye the river green. He wanted to dye actually the whole lake green. That's how much of a powerhouse this guy was. And then he got a hold of a former cop who worked also with a guy who's a plumber. He goes, there is a type of dye you could dye water with, but you need a lot of it. The mayor of Chicago had unlimited funds and unlimited power, and he decided to hire this cop. I think his name's Tommy Rowan. And he goes, I want you to get a couple boats. And he was in charge of the police boating unit that searched the waters for different crimes and so forth. And so I think it was 55, 56 years ago, they dyed the little canal there green. They do it either the night before or the morning of St. Patrick's Day. And the sun's shining and it hits off the water, and the water's not deep in this area. It's as green as your shirt. I mean, it is blisteringly green. And it's really fascinating because they do it in a matter of 30 minutes. They just dump the dye, stir it around. And what you do on St. Patrick's Day in Chicago, a lot of people, is you just go over by the river, you grab a pint, you walk outside. Open alcohol is legal for this one day of the year. And you just look at it, and it never really gets old because you can't figure out how they do it. And the cool thing about it is he's never given up the recipe. He's never told about what kind of dye you use for the river. And they did it this morning. They took it last year off, but it can get pretty heavy in Chicago on St. Patrick's Day. What you want to do on St. Patrick's Day in Chicago, though, is around like 8:30, 9 o'clock, call it a night. Get started early, get done early, because the people who get a little sloppy go 8 o'clock and later. And that's when you get in fights and get in trouble and people get injured.
It sounds a bit like St. Patrick's Day in Dublin, to be honest
Right.
with you. Very, very, very similar. I love actually your story about Brezzy there, as he's known in Ireland. He's done a few things. He's actually written some mindfulness books for kids, and like a really interesting guy. But as Michael flicked up the picture of him, I don't think any of us want to stand beside him outside a pub where there's any women involved, because we will just be trampled on, I think is probably the technical term. I love hearing about St. Patrick's Day in Chicago, but I seem to recall, you might have mentioned before actually, you had St. Patrick's Day in New York City before one time. You talk about not getting into fights, but sometimes it's unavoidable. How's Patrick's Day in New York compared to Chicago, Paul?
This is a warning story for you kids out there. I was about 25 years old. I was in New York City, my first New York City St. Patrick's Day. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone's into their pints. Everyone's having a good time. No one's getting hurt. And these firemen come walking in, and they're wearing their full fireman regalia, hats, everything. And, there's some big, strong guys, these New York City firemen. And we start playing pool with a couple of them. We decided to play for rounds of beer. And my friend and I, the more we drank, the better we got at pool, surprisingly. Usually it goes the other way. But, And I start just ripping off shots. And the fireman next to me, he's probably about 6'4", about 250, I would say. I mean, he's a big, big guy. I'm about 6 foot tall, about 180. And I'm, I got, beer in each hand, pool cue under the arm. And after I beat him for the third time in a row, I took the rack, right? And I walked around the pool table and I put the rack around his head, like over his head, like a collar. I go, rack him. And he turns around and he punches me from behind. And his hand goes like this. Boom. And I hit the deck and I don't remember a thing. And there was a fight going on above me. I got up and I had a white T-shirt on under like a flannel shirt. So but I had the flannel off. There was actually step marks on my chest from where like people were fighting around me. My friends were jumping in and, I was just dropped. And the lesson out there is whenever you run into a 6'4", 250-pound fireman, be nice to him. Don't give him an excuse after 8 pints of whatever he's had to let out his frustrations on some little guy. And that was real dumb. I can't believe I did it. I remember doing it, and I thought it was a funny thing at the time. I thought he'd take it as a joke, and I got dropped.
I couldn't imagine that happening here, to be honest. I think if it happened here, boys, we'd honestly, like, in a good way, we'd probably be in the cells for a night, to be honest. If it happened up here in the north, I'd be finished. But sure, that's a different story for a different day. Paul, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, like, over here, and I don't know what these boys think, but for me, it's almost quite sad because I know last year St. Patrick's Day wasn't really what it was here in Ireland, but it almost hits you this year because it's like the second year and you're like, oh man, I can't really do anything. What's it like in New York today? Obviously, you were working this morning on the Dan Patrick Show.
Right.
Is it sort of chilled at the minute? I know you guys have opened up a bit more, but we have nothing. Like, we haven't got a bar open since, what, boys? Christmas Eve? 24th?
Wow.
Web pubs have been closed since March the 12th last year.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's very weird here because if you go back a year ago today, we were, I think that was about 4 or 5 days after the NCAA tournament got canceled. And I did not think the college basketball in America, the NCAA tournament, was cancelable. It's a cash cow. It's one of the biggest events in American sports. It lasts 3.5 weeks. And I was so naive at the time. I can remember it was March 12th. And I was like, well, they'll pause the tournament for a day or two or a couple days or push it back. I had no idea. I thought baseball would go on as scheduled. I was very naive about COVID. I think a lot of us were because we're wrapped up in our little sports world and we think sports will plow through anything. Now it feels kind of the opposite in America. It feels like we're a bit on the goal line. Every day in here, I just got a bunch of emails from that they're moving up vaccination time periods. And younger people are getting vaccinated faster. The supply of vaccinations, it seems like, I'm just talking for people in Connecticut where I live, it seems like it's readily available or becoming readily available for younger people. So in America, it does feel like everything's really close to opening up fully, or not fully, but you're desperate for it. But the NCAA tournament is going on. It starts in a couple days, and everyone's a bit holding their breath because all these teams are in Indianapolis at different hotels and different facilities, and they're going to try to play it in a semi-bubble in Indianapolis. And there's 64 teams, 68 teams. You think about that. You got 12 kids a team. You got the staff people. You're looking at 30 people for 64 teams. What are the odds something doesn't happen? And you're basically just holding your breath every day that there's no news. We want to talk sports on our show. We hopefully can talk sports every day and not cancellations and pauses. Those words are just, it bums you out.
Paul, I suppose if we're talking sports and St. Patrick's Day, and if we go back to this time last year, March 17, 2020, we had Thomas Edward Brady announce that he was leaving the New England Patriots and he was taking his considerable talents to the state of Florida, down to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Did anyone foresee the way it would play out, that he would win the 7th ring in his first season outside of New England?
Going back to him saying he was going to play for Tampa Bay, if anyone in America, any sports media says they knew it was happening, they would have reported it. However they kept that secret, I don't know how. From what I've heard about the storyline of what happened was he met with Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, and Bill Belichick on I think it was a Tuesday. And then he made his decision the next morning and called the management of the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Bruce Arians, the head coach of the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, to give you an example, they were used to be a very hapless franchise. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, they were terrible. And in the past 20 years, they've been quite a bit better, where that stink of futility is off them. But the idea a year and 2 days ago of them signing Tom Brady was preposterous. Even though they had good players and a really good defense and some good players around him, it just didn't compute with anybody. I don't think anyone really put it out there. There were other teams that were rumored, but I don't remember hearing much about the Buccaneers. And, the one thing I've learned is never to doubt Brady. I would never bet my money against him. If you go back to 28-3 against Atlanta, and when he joined that team last year, their Super Bowl odds went up, but not up to the point where you thought they were a favorite. And there was a time last year, I think it was November, where they had a little dip, and they didn't look too good. They just looked spotty. They looked, one day the defense would be good, then the next week the offense, and then they'd lose by a bunch of touchdowns. But he did it. He pulled it off again. And the smart thing about Tom Brady, he knows as a businessman, my contract's not as important as my rings. And the more rings I get, the more money I get from endorsements, from all of the other stuff. And every year with the Patriots, he takes pay cuts or pay delayments, and he did it again with the Buccaneers, and it's allowed him to sign more people. So, my advice for you is don't bet against the guys. It's never worked out.
That tricky mute button.
Yeah, it is a tricky mute button. Yeah.
Drink break.
Michael keeps tricking me with these buttons. You touched on COVID last year, and if you recall, Roger Goodell got a lot of stick last year for proceeding with free agency. And I suppose just on the Patriots and the whole Tom Brady situation, free agency started this week. I don't think any of us saw it coming in terms of how proactive the Patriots have been in terms of the players they've signed. What's your overall thoughts on Bill Belichick's new way of doing things?
It's a 180. They've got a history of not spending much money, not breaking the bank. Now, they didn't break the bank for any one player. It's almost like they bought 6 or 7 good players, which I think is a good strategy. When I'm not especially a Patriots, I'm a Bears fan, but if I'm a Patriots fan, I'm like, it's not my money he's spending. I go to one game a year. What do I care? If you compare to what they had last year, they had no depth. Players tapped out because of COVID. Players left for other reasons. And they need depth at all positions. It was really surprising, though. And the thing about the Patriots is you never know what they're going to do. Nothing ever gets out. The media report on an organization, and they get almost nowhere. It's really, I think, because Bill Belichick's in charge of everything, just about, to a point. Robert Kraft gets involved, the owner. But if Bill Belichick doesn't leak it to anybody in the media, which he doesn't really have any media friends. He has a couple you'll hear some stuff from. But there's no way to get any information on them, so there's no way to see anything coming. I'm curious with you guys. Do you guys each have a team that you specifically root for? And I want to know from your end, because you're doing questions with me, I'm going to ask you some questions. How did your fandom come about with your team? Like, did you like the uniforms? Do you like a player? Did you see a game randomly? How did that work out?
Me and Colin support the same team as Todd Fritz. I just wanted to get that in first. Big Broncos fans. Had to get Todd on the show, by the way. That's it.
Oh, he'll come out.
Well, I'm the oldest, so I'm definitely going to go first. I'm 43 this month. My first experience of NFL was the Giants-Broncos Super Bowl in Pasadena. And then thereafter, I went to the States with my parents for holidays. Our friend was from Dublin. She lived in California. And because of that Super Bowl and being the first game, Giants won. They became my team, and they have been ever since. So, yeah, I'm the old guy with a few of them coming in behind me.
That's cool. That's a good franchise to root for, because I really compare. I want to get to all you guys too. It's like when I decided to choose a soccer team, it kind of chooses you. I became a Liverpool fan, not because I had any allegiance. I know. I knew someone in the room was going to get upset. Stevie G. I love Stevie G. But I was in Italy. I think I may have mentioned this before. And I was watching a soccer match. I'd always liked the Premier League. This is a long, long time ago. But I happened to see a match. It was Liverpool, and it was young Steven Gerrard. And I was like, that seemed like a cool team. And that was it. And now there's been some bad days, but there's lately been some good days. How about the rest of you guys with your NFL team?
Well, as Michael said, I'm a big Broncos fan, and all the way back to John Elway. Paul, I talked to you the last time. I talked about how we love kind of a tragic hero or a flawed hero a little bit. And so I remember seeing this just orange blur, this number 7 who was here, there, and everywhere. But, the first Super Bowl, my mother allowed me to stay up for. I was very young, and I was so excited. The Broncos against the 49ers, and I was so young, I thought we'd a chance. and as to this day remains the historic loss. So that was the first sporting event I cried over, but that began my lifelong affliction of being a Broncos fan. Now, there have been some amazing moments along the way, but it's a bit like being a guy with a sore tooth at times. If we don't have Manning or Elway at QB, so staying up till 3:30 in the morning to watch some of our QBs has been interesting to say the least. But the last few years, obviously, of Elway and the time under Manning were incredible. And I've been fortunate to see some great players with the Broncos, the likes of Steve Atwater and stuff. And I tried to make a pilgrimage to the Mile High City in pre-COVID times at least once a year.
Oh, that's great! Wow, that's more than some people do. I think you go see more Broncos games than Todd Fritz, and he lives in the state. How about the rest of you guys?
So, Michael, you go ahead. Finish off the Broncos duo.
Broncos since 2011. I was on a college night out on a Monday night. Came back. Tebow beat the Jets. 2 weeks later, my future wife bought me a Tim Tebow jersey that was stopped in Iceland for £35 in the north. £35 customs. Move on 2 or 3 years later, playing the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. I'm the cockiest man in Ireland for 2 weeks, and the rest is history in that sense. A terrible night, but thank God, look, I got very lucky supporting the Broncos. Really enjoyed it. Then Peyton Manning comes in. Great few years, especially I was living in Spain the year we won the Super Bowl. It was incredible. Living in Barcelona. Met a lot of Americans that week of the Super Bowl. They were all over watching the game in Spain, ironically, for some reason. And the last 4 years have been forgettable. Jesus. I mean, there's not even a start there, but, it's good fun. At least we can say to ourselves, I think out of all of us, apart from Mark at the bottom, he'll say who he supports in a second, at least we've won something in the last 10 years. I think in the NFL, it's different to soccer or the Premier League. If you've won it once in 10 years, you can take it and run. But looking forward to seeing what the future holds. And it'd be good to chat to Todd about the Broncos sometime.
Paul, before Mark comes in, Michael on the show last night was referring to the anniversary. And obviously he was talking about the Tom Brady anniversary. Mm-hmm. But the first anniversary that pops into my head is actually Plaxico Burress signed for the Giants on Patrick's Day, wore number 17. Gave me my greatest moment in terms of supporting the Giants, beating the Patriots in that fantastic Super Bowl in 08.
So you're a Giants fan. I went to high school again on the south side of Chicago, and one of the guys I went to high school with is Rodney Harrison, the former defensive back of the New England Patriots. And he comes on our show. He worked with Dan Patrick for years at Football Night in America for NBC Sports. And he was the defensive back trying to rip the ball out of David Tyree's hands on that play. And when it doesn't get brought up to him too often, but when he does interviews, sometimes people ask because it's one of the most memorable, greatest plays in NFL history. First, Eli scrambling and getting loose, but then the catch by Tyree against the helmet. And when you ask Rodney about it, his shoulders get up and he gets his head. He starts getting he is so mad about it, and it doesn't go away in any way. And this guy's got rings, plural. I think he's got a couple rings with the Patriots. It's not like he's a guy with no rings. But he is so mad that he wasn't able to rip that ball out. And he tried everything. You could see him ripping at it, pulling at it. He's going on the ground. He's still pulling. It bothers him to this day. And, that's what kind of competitor Harrison is. He will never get over it. And when it gets brought up, it's almost like he's replaying it in his body. And you can see him get upset.
Just send him the Joe Buck and Troy Aikman commentary. That'll cheer him up. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that because Paul, obviously Harrison does have a couple of rings. He was, sealing interceptions in AFC Championship games against Peyton Manning. I mean, he not only has rings, he stepped up when it really counted, obviously, to propel his teams to those championships. But I love your description of that play where you mentioned about Manning scrambling and the catch and forgetting to mention the 5 Giants all holding at the exact same time, which somehow gets missed on that play multiple times. And if that doesn't give it away, I am actually a Patriots fan. I actually got into American football when I was really young. I visited Florida, and I do still have a 6-year-old Miami Dolphins jersey because Dan Marino was the only player I knew. And the only game I can remember actually watching the Dolphins late night, one night on Channel 5 of all things, was when they stopped the Broncos when they were 13-0 and going for a perfect season and maintaining, obviously, the Dolphins dynasty. But I went to university and decided, hey, I think this is a great sport. I'm going to watch it a bit more. I'm going to pick a team. And I remember watching the game, and I like to go for the underdog. And sure enough, I was watching a game where some skinny little Michigan kid came in for their $100 million starting quarterback. And of course, that was Thomas Edward Patrick Brady. And it's been a pretty good 22 years since then, except until last Patrick's Day, obviously. So I can't and won't complain in any way.
See, you're going to have a rough next generation. I had
yeah.
You were on scholarship, full scholarship for 20 years with the Patriots. This is as good as it's going to get in any American sport. I mean, it's better than the Bulls. It's better than the Lakers or the Yankees. I think you're in for a rough decade.
Paul, I'm going to cry myself to sleep with all of our 6 Super Bowl victories. It's okay.
I mean, that's the thing. Keep you warm. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, and I made a deal with the big guy. I said, I just want 1 Cubs World Series win. I don't want 3. Sure, I want 3, but I don't need 3. So, I did my due diligence. I behaved. 2016, but 2003, when that was ripped away from me, I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. That was pain. That was some pain that you only get over when your team wins a title. And in 2016, when the Cubs won the World Series, I'm still a Cubs fan. I watch. I would like them to go to the World Series. I don't need them to go to the World Series. There's a difference. And it's almost like that Cubs 2016 victory is like a warm blanket on a cold night that I'll have for the rest of my life. And you know what? I would love to have another one, but I'll be okay if I don't.
So you're literally a mind reader. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned about the Cubs. You mentioned 2003. That was the Steve Bartman game, obviously, wasn't it? Which was, infamous to say the least. But you are also a Bears fan, as you alluded to, and you do have that 85 Super Bowl, which is massive in Europe because that was the first year of terrestrial coverage of American football. There's a lot of Bears fans, a lot of Giants fans, a lot of 49ers fans because of that, Cowboys fans as well, because of that era. But that Bears team obviously hopefully gives you some succor in terms of performance. Since then, and we've talked about it on the show, in fact, since the creation of the Chicago Bears, you have never had a decent quarterback. When Jay Cutler is the top of all your statistical charts, that is a factory of sadness in itself. And I mean, it gets worse because they basically go Jim McMahon, Mitch Trubisky is right up there. Jim Harbaugh, I think, is number 3. But I have to ask you, because we're in the midst of free agency, Dalton is coming. And no, that's not Patrick Swayze suddenly reincarnated and being a bouncer. That is truly the king of the Gingers, the Red Rocket, Andy Dalton, is coming to Chicago. Paul, I have to ask, how are you feeling about that?
Well, here's the thing. As a Bear fan, your bar for quarterbacks is so freaking low that we're really delusional. And now, if we had signed Andy Dalton without thinking we were going to sign Russell Wilson, it wouldn't have been that bad. Andy Dalton a couple of years ago was a Pro Bowler. And, last year his stats with Dallas are not bad. Andy Dalton, in one day, it would be the greatest quarterback in Chicago Bear history statistically. If you took his stats with Cincinnati and popped them on the Bears, he's all-time in every category. However, about 3 weeks ago, and it was on our show, the Dan Patrick Show, about 4 weeks ago, right at the Super Bowl. Tuesday after the Super Bowl, we have Russell Wilson on our show. We've had Russell on 100 times. We've known him very well. And he came on after the Super Bowl. And Dan noticed something at the Super Bowl that Russell Wilson, who won the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award, love you, Walter, he was standing on the sidelines watching Tom Brady win a Super Bowl. And he saw Russell's face like, boy, I bet that just burns him, that he's sitting on the sidelines watching Brady win another one. And also Brady has input on personnel. So when Dan starts interviewing him on Tuesday after the Super Bowl, he goes, would you like more input with your team? He goes, of course, everybody would. He goes, no, I want to know if you would. Dan's a good interviewer. He won't let that go. He goes, yeah, absolutely. I would like to. I see what Brady's doing down there and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, do you think you'll finish your career with the Seahawks? And he goes, I don't know. That's not my decision. And that story blew up that day. It was the biggest story in American sports. And really 3 weeks later, kind of still is. And a couple days after that, his agent leaked to, I think, Adam Schefter of ESPN, that if they traded Russell Wilson, these are the 4 teams he'd be interested in. That's unprecedented in American sports. Usually star athletes, they may leak that they are interested in trading, or it may be leaked. Rarely do they give a list of 4 teams. I've never seen that. And one of those teams, shockingly, was the Chicago Bears. I actually thought it was like an Onion article or a spoof. I thought it was being baited by one of my friends, being catfish. Why would Russell Wilson want to go play for the Bears? Is he masochistic? Has it been too good for him? He wants a really tough road. But Bears fans and my friends in Chicago and the media I know in Chicago went nuts with this story, and they've been going nuts with it for the past 3 weeks. And to the point where you get delusional, you're thinking, there's got to be a way. We're going to get Russell Wilson. He's by far the best quarterback ever to walk into Chicago. And then we found out it was Andy Dalton yesterday. I compared it to this. Imagine you're 16 years old and your parents say, well, we're going to get you a car. We're going to get you a car for your 16th birthday. How great is that? Who wouldn't want a car? Most kids don't get a brand new car. And you're looking around the house and you see like a brochure for a Porsche or a Mercedes or, some really nice car. And you're like, my parents are going to get me a Porsche or a Mercedes. And you wake up on that day, and you go outside, and it's all wrapped up in this bow. And there's like a used Honda Civic sitting out there, like a used, I don't know, kind of average car. Nothing wrong with it. A used Toyota, Prius, but like old and, not really that great anymore. In your head, you're thinking I'm getting a Porsche, and you perfectly got a decent car. And that's what Andy Dalton is. He's a decent car. But in our heads, we got crazed. We thought we were getting Russ Wilson. That's a long way of saying there will never be a great quarterback in Chicago. We could overcome any great quarterback. You could trade us Patrick Mahomes right now, and we will make him into a C- quarterback. Nobody can outlast the Bears with quarterbacks. Nobody.
Paul,
It's a bit like when,
sorry, just a quick one. Paul, would it not help if your parents did the utmost to get you the Porsche? Because if you look at the information coming out today, the Bears offered 3 number ones, another third round pick, 2 players. They've done their utmost to get the player in. It just hasn't materialized.
I hope that people understand that it appears that the Bears made a really strong offer, and you're not going to find out who the players are. You probably won't. Maybe some media person will, but they don't want to leak that. But I think some Bears fans are really delusional this week, and they got themselves believing that they were getting Russell, and the explanations don't matter. I don't know. It's a tough time. Again, Bears fans are, a lot of them live in that 85 past, as I do, because that was the peak of my Bear fandom. But if you're 27 years old, if you're 37 years old, you have no recollection of the 85 Bears. They're a bunch of old guys who are all on TV and they talk about all the time, and your uncle talks about it, your grandfather, your father. People under 40 have no recollection.
we actually spoke to you, I think it was the weekend before the Super Bowl, like pre-recording everything. And then the Friday, we got Mike Singletary. We're like, what?
That's
so
awesome.
it was a bit nuts.
That's awesome. You got Singletary. Again, my favorite player of all time was Walter Payton. And, it was, great to have him in Chicago. And I actually think Walter Payton, I don't think he's ever been to Ireland, but he went to England once. And he was like in something where he jousted or wore like a suit of armor. I can remember seeing a video where he was in London and he was in a suit of armor doing something with the royal family. It was years and years ago. But, I remember the 85 Bears were, some of my friends who were from Europe said, I think it was a year after 85, the Bears played a preseason game.
They did, in Wembley, yeah.
And you guys knew the refrigerator, Walter Payton and Jim McMahon, and that was the first time people in Ireland and England had access to American football live or tape delayed. And that Bears team kind of exploded overseas. And in the 90s, it was harder to find NFL games live and even taped.
There is a bit of a thing with the refrigerator, though, and I'll send it to you later on. Just I'll DM you. There's an analyst during the Super Bowl that questions why somebody's called and he's being completely serious, why he's being called the refrigerator, and he asks, is he cool? But I guess one thing I wanted to ask you, Paul, really quickly is, you mentioned the Cubs there, and I jumped in saying you're almost a mind reader. My next question was, I'm not sure what your knowledge of GAF or like Irish GAF football is. Have you much of a knowledge about it, or?
No, I wanted to see a game. I was a match or game, because I try to get my terminology right. I was in Galway and I was going to go see a match, and we couldn't get there. We couldn't find a ride out to see a match. I've seen it on TV, and it looks hardcore. We think, I've never played like rugby or that type of style of football, but I've learned one thing: don't get in a fight with a rugby player. And I see those guys with their with the ears. I think I made much of the story with you guys, but if you see ears that are all crunched like this, don't fight that guy. Irish football players, that's their kind of style.
As a Cubs fan,
like the farm man in New York.
As a Cubs fan, though, obviously those, years of hurt, generations of hurt. I remember as not even a baseball fan, watching when the Cubs won the World Series against Cleveland. I was almost tearing up myself. But we've a county over here, and these boys are about to laugh. Mayo boys. They haven't won the All-Ireland since 1951, which is the epitome of sport here for that. And they've lost in 89, 96, 97, 2004, 2006, 2012, 2013, 2016, 2017, 2020. They are apparently cursed by an Irish priest. And that's what I was going to say. I think it's the equivalent of the Chicago Cubs.
So the team's from, what's the name of the team again?
It's Mayo, so it's County Mayo in Ireland.
And so they've been in the title match, or how does it work? Where they've been
Pretty much title match. Yeah,
they've lost
Yeah.
like 7 times.
yeah, loads of times, man. Like 10. Yeah, but 10 times. Yeah,
Oh
do,
my God.
do,
Well,
do you know the story of the priest, Michael? Do you?
I do. I've heard the story, but feel free to tell Paul. I'm happy enough.
Well,
It's all good.
unless I'm mistaken, but the last time they won it, they were on the way home with the trophy celebrating, and there was a funeral going on in a local area, and they, rather than stopping and paying their respects, they proceeded on with their celebrations through the funeral party, and that priest who was managing that funeral put a spell on them that they would never win a championship again, and yeah, they haven't since.
Well,
I mean,
actually, being even more precise, Brian, he said it apparently put a curse on them. They would never win the championship game while any of those players were still alive. So there's 2 of the team that are still alive, and I don't know how Mayo haven't taken them out with snipers. I don't know.
I'm just saying, it's terrible for those guys. I mean, those guys are probably eating healthy and doing the right thing, and people are rooting against them.
Yeah, they haven't got COVID yet. Maybe they'll work on that.
Well, with the Chicago Cubs, there was an old, they called it the curse of the Billy Goat. And there was a guy who owned a restaurant in Chicago, and supposedly the Cubs did something to offend him. He wanted to bring a Billy Goat to a game, and he put a curse on them. I don't know, but I remember watching Game 7 of the World Series with the Cubs, and they're winning the whole game. And I'm telling you, and you guys, if you're a hardcore sports fan of any team, you know when your team is close to victory, there's pain. And I had a stomach ache for a week and a half when the Cubs were in the World Series. You'd think it'd be a glorious time. I got to go to Game 3 and 4 in Chicago. They lost both, by the way, which made me crazy, and because I thought I was at fault. And so I remember watching the game, and every game when they would win, until they won the game, I had a stomach ache, and they would take a lead, and it's like my stomach ache went away just a little bit. And I'm watching Game 7, and I think in Game 7 for the Cubs against the Indians in 16, Dexter Fowler hit a leadoff home run. So that means they're leading 1-0 after the first at bat. And I remember just sitting there in my chair going, just trying to get air and trying to enjoy the fact that there's a lead. And they led most of the game. And I think it was, I guess it was the 9th inning to send it to extra innings. A guy named Raji Davis of the Cleveland Indians hit a home run to tie the game. And when he hit the home run, I was sitting by myself in the dark in my house. And I sat back in my seat, and it almost like hit me like a wave, like, oh, this is how the Cubs are going to break my heart that time. This is how it's going to happen. This feels right. The Cubs losing in grand fashion feels more normal to me. It actually felt like not comforting, but like, this is what I've grown up around. The Cubs ripping my heart out and having pain. Instead of thinking, oh, this is terrible, I'm mad, and yelling at the team, I'm like, this is how it's going to be. Coming back from 3-1 to tie up the World Series and losing after having a lead late into the game. Oh, and like my mind was closer to thinking that they're going to lose than they're going to win. And on the last out of the World Series, I think it was Chris Bryant picked it up, threw it over to Anthony Rizzo. Until the moment Rizzo caught the ball and held it up in his hands, I never thought for a second the Cubs were going to win the World Series. Until that moment, like if you had a picture of my face, it would have been like Bill Murray's face. You see Bill Murray's face? It's like he goes like this because he's shocked. The concept of that is foreign to us, the Cubs fans. And I ran outside. True story. It's 1:00 in the morning, Trumbull, Connecticut. My family's asleep. Everyone's asleep. Quiet little neighborhood. I took all my clothes off, ran outside into my driveway, and yelled, "Cubs win," completely naked. Now, it wasn't that risky because I wasn't like on a busy street or a busy neighborhood. But I remember thinking, like, if I'm not going to do it now, when am I going to do it? I ran back inside and put my clothes on. My wife comes out, and she hears me yelling. She goes, "What the hell is going on here?" I'm like, "Cubs win, Cubs win." She goes, "Go to bed." I'm like, "I'm going to bed."
Why are you yelling? Why have you got no clothes on? So many questions in such a short period of time.
Right. You're disappointed by everything, if you can imagine.
So actually, Paul, you mentioned the curse of the Billy Goat. Obviously, the curse of the Bambino was broken by the Red Sox. You know, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Cleveland won a championship with LeBron going back and obviously winning the NBA. What is now the biggest curse in American sports? Is it just the Jets are cursed for being the Jets? Or, I mean, is there something famous, really?
I would say no on the Jets because they did win it with Joe Namath. I know that's 1,000 years ago, but it's still enough that's in people's minds. I would say the teams that America would rally around would be teams like the Cleveland Indians and the Detroit Lions. And even when the Cubs were playing the Indians in the World Series, I remember thinking to myself, if the Cubs happen to lose this, at least they're losing it to the Indians, and the town gets their victory. So it wasn't been that terrible. I would say the Detroit Lions, I don't think they've won a playoff game since the 40s. And, that's a hell of a long time not to even get one playoff victory. That's a team that I think people would root around. That city's had a lot of tough times, and I think people will get on the bandwagon for that team.
Paul, this is why I call sports fandom an affliction, because it's that famous quote of, it's the despair I can handle, it's the hope that kills you.
Yeah.
And when you find yourself in it. Now, for many teams around the league, outside of Russell Wilson, the other story of this offseason is Deshaun Watson. And the hope that Deshaun Watson might ride into town. You will have a franchise QB who's going to take you to the promised land. It's the huge talking point over here as it is in America. Your own thoughts on that situation and where it might end?
It's a real awkward situation because it feels like it's beyond fixable. And Deshaun Watson and his agent aren't even speaking to the coaches and the staff. And I don't know, because the Houston Texans, they seem like a pretty good franchise the past decade, but then they dispatched J.J. Watt, which is understandable. He's older and he's not as good as he used to be. Still a good player, but then the Watson thing, they've got a young, healthy, great quarterback under contract. This is what the NFL is built around. You want that, then they have it, and somehow, and we don't know all the details, they've alienated him. I think it started with trading a star wide receiver. I think he's got some problems with ownership off the field with some of their beliefs, and I think he and his agent said, let's do this now. Let's not wait till the contract's up. Let's not wait till you're 29 or 28. And they've made a hard decision. Now, if you're the Texans, this should be the biggest trade in NFL history because you have a young, healthy, under contract quarterback, which is what every team dreams of. If I'm the New York Jets, I don't think there's a limit on what I give up for him. That said, there's another factor with this because of contracts and money. Money always drives everything in the NFL. The Jets right now have the second pick in the draft and can draft a quarterback. Let's say they took Zach Wilson of BYU. It's a very popular quarterback. They get him at a rookie contract. The Jets have draft picks. They have cap room, a lot of money to spend. And if they draft a quarterback out of college, he doesn't cost them that much. The first 4 years is not that bad. And teams are they'd rather reset at the quarterback position than to trade and do things like that. And you go back to Patrick Mahomes. When he was drafted, they had a good quarterback in Kansas City. They had Alex Smith, good quarterback under contract. But they said, I think we've seen everything he could do. We're going to restart with a new younger guy, and that seems to be the move. I don't know what the Texans are thinking. If they're not taking trade offers from him, which would be nuts, I don't think he's going to hold out for a season. That would be insanity, but Le'Veon Bell did it. So there's a precedent.
Just on the Bucs, I know we discussed it earlier in terms of the winning the Super Bowl and Tom Brady going there and Brady taking the reductions in the salary as per what he done in New England. But as a celebration on the boat or just off the boat, the GM made that bold statement that everybody was coming back and we're going to reset and go again for another championship. And I was quite surprised in a way that they got it done. I know a lot of players have kind of latched on to there's a real opportunity to go back. The Saints are kind of in flux now with Breeze retiring, and they're running back kind of a team that we saw last year from the Chiefs is very much in play for the Bucs again. They've done a great job in getting all the marquee players back for next season.
Yeah, it seems like they're pretty smart down there. I would say there's a lot of benefits for playing with the Tampa Bay Bucs. The coach doesn't seem to be a guy who's going to grind you out, Bruce Arians. Financially, Florida's very friendly. A lot of players go down there because the taxes are better, and that does factor in when agents tell you where to play. I think some guys like their running back Leonard Fournette may have to go elsewhere to get paid, but as long as they keep Brady and most of the defense, and add a couple of people on offense. Also, I think the fact is, you can get more endorsements and more other things when you win. And a guy like Shaq Barrett, who's a very good defensive linebacker, I should say, he now finds himself in the position of being somewhat of a superstar, and he wasn't before. But when you get to the Super Bowl with Tom Brady, you get that big stage with hundreds of millions of people watching you, you now become a household name. That's going to be tough to give up, because if I'm Shaq Barrett and they offer me, let's say they offered him 4 years for $70 million, but think of a team that's somewhat irrelevant. No offense, the Denver Broncos. I had to say it. Let's say the Denver Broncos called and said, we're going to give you 4 years and $72 million. Would that $2 million make you want to leave Florida and go play for the Broncos? No offense, but you're probably not going to be deep into the playoffs next year. And Shaq Barrett said, okay, I may, give up a few bucks here and there, but I'm probably going deep in the playoffs with Tom Brady, and that's going to get me paid in endorsements and lifestyle, and that's very attractive.
And Paul, you mentioned about maybe adding a couple of other players. You mentioned the other night on the show, James White as a free agent. Obviously, a long history with Brady, 11 catches in the Super Bowl in the past. So there's a lot of sense there.
I could see it. I still see Edelman ending up his career in Tampa.
No, don't say that. Just no, please.
No offense. I know Edelman, and that guy's born for tank tops and jean shorts down there in Tampa. He would go down there in a second.
I was saying last night, we're doing a show every night this week during free agency week because obviously there's so much happening. I said to the boys last night, I now have 10 Patriots jerseys. The only 2 I've got left are 2 Edelman ones, one of which is signed, which are players that are still with the Patriots. So I'm just praying.
Edelman's a fascinating guy. We had him in studio a couple years ago, right after he had his knee surgery. And he was walking in the room like in slow motion. And he's about 5'9", probably about 175 pounds. He looks like a normal little guy on the street. Like the last thing he looked like is a professional athlete. He looked like some neighbor of yours who's in good shape. And I remember thinking, like, how does this guy do it? He's small. And I think we had him on October, and he could barely walk into the studio. He was walking very slow. And Dan asked him, he goes, if the Patriots make the Super Bowl, are you playing? He goes, oh, yeah, I'm playing the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter what my injury is. He goes, you're going to have to, he goes, I'll cut stuff off. I'll inject stuff. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm getting out there for the Super Bowl. He goes, I can't play today. I can't play in December, but we have to make the Super Bowl. I'll be there.
If you haven't read his book actually is fascinating in terms of some of the stuff, and even the way his dad trained him up was just like ruthless, but made him the player he is.
He's one of my favorite players. He's one of those guys that probably will not make the Hall of Fame. He's going to make the Patriots Hall of Fame. Definitely. If you said, that's the thing about Halls of Fame in America. You need statistics. It really helps you being Pro Bowler and other statistics. But if you needed a catch in the Super Bowl, Julian Edelman's top 3 all time. And to me, that's Hall of Fame worthy. There's certain athletes that I'm sure you guys have athletes in your country where they may not be the biggest star on their team, but with 2 minutes left in a match, they're the guy you want with the ball. And those aren't necessarily the highest paid players.
Yeah, still the greatest catch of all time and the greatest comeback of all time, obviously, by Edelman. Sorry, ignoring the Tyreek.
Don't listen to him.
Ignoring the Tyreek.
It's grand.
Actually, Paul, just as completely side topic, and just staying on free agency in a theme, one move I saw, very small move, but is amusing to me for one reason. Michael Brockers has been traded by the Rams to the Lions for a 7th round pick, and you know where I'm going with this.
Oh, yeah. Good job.
The second the trade was made between Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford, he was reported slating Jared Goff and saying, well, Jared Goff's no Matthew Stafford. We've got an upgrade here. Thank God. And now he's reunited with Jared Goff in the Lions.
Look, I mean, you got to call your agent and say to your agent, hey, look, I know I'm being shopped, but you can't let me get traded to Detroit. Even just for 4 Irish guys and an American are joking about you on a show right now. I mean, how far has this story gone? You made one little comment about Jared Goff, who took you to a Super Bowl, by the way, and Matt Stafford has never been to the second round of the playoffs. So I think Jared Goff should make him wash his car or something like that. There should be some type of bro penalty for saying that out loud. He's got to he's got to do something. I don't know what it is.
Paul, I think it's hilarious because I think we're going to just go around all of this one more time here very quickly. I think it's hilarious that we've talked for nearly an hour and we haven't mentioned the point that the Dan Patrick show, we haven't even talked about your role there or anything, but they almost broke the internet today with that whole situation with Russell Wilson. I know you've talked about him, but apparently the Bears offered 3 first-round picks, 3rd-round pick, and 2 starters. Obviously, you weren't told who the starters were. I guess my question before I ask it, this has been a good hour so far, I'm not going to lie. Do you think Russell Wilson leaves Seattle? I mean, do you think he ends up anywhere, or do you think he's going to stay there?
I think he'll be there next year. If I ran the Seattle Seahawks, if I was the general manager, I would worry about my job if I traded Russell Wilson. If he's still on your team next year, you have a decent team. You have an above-average team. You're going to win 10 games. You're going to make the playoffs, and that kind of stuff doesn't get you fired. Trading a Hall of Fame quarterback who's 32 is insane to me. And I don't care what you get back, because all you do in the NFL every year as a general manager is you plug in defensive ends and linemen and all that stuff. The search for the quarterback is everything in the NFL. You have him. He's under contract. You don't have to do anything. He's actually underpaid. Do whatever makes him happy. If he wants to come to a GM meeting and hang out, fantastic. That's it. That's all I got to do to make you happy is put you on a couple Zoom calls when we discuss the trading deadline. I don't want to see what the big deal is. And if they trade him and for the next decade they search for quarterbacks, you're going to lose your job. John Schneider is the general manager of the Seahawks. If he trades Russell Wilson and they miss a couple playoffs, you're unemployed. I know you get another job, but I don't know if you want to uproot your family. You've been there 10 years. I think people should think about that kind of stuff when they make decisions. It's going to cost me my job. And Russell hasn't demanded a trade. He's demanding action. And the trade is the backup plan. So this is fixable. Unlike Deshaun Watson, I think it's fixable.
Paul, it was interesting, right? Because you made the point and Mark made the point that 85 Bears team, that era, right? The first time on terrestrial television, and Mark made the point, you see Bears fans here, right? You see Giants fans, you see 49ers fans, you see Raiders fans. You don't see Broncos fans, right? Even though the Broncos were successful in that era. And we were joking earlier that about the irrelevancy of this current Broncos team. Now, look, Michael and I are fans, but there's almost this civil war in Denver, it feels at the moment, where one side is like, Drew Lock, you got to give him time. And the other side is like, we got to move on. You got to find a different answer at QB. As somebody who is removed from Denver, but is plugged into the league and plugged into the media, what are your thoughts on that situation? How did the Broncos become relevant again?
When I watch Drew Lock, he has the swagger and the behavior of a star quarterback. He just hasn't done it on the field, including his team, not just him. I don't know. I lean towards supporting him and going with it and surrounding him with some, decent offensive linemen and wide receivers and tight ends. I think you make any quarterback better like that. I remember him at Missouri, and he seemed like the perfect drop-back quarterback. I don't know, but there's no patience anymore. The NFL is not a patient league. Go back to the Arizona Cardinals a couple of years ago. They drafted Josh Rosen out of UCLA. After one season, they got the number one draft pick, and they said, we've seen enough. We're going with Kyler Murray. You look at the Miami Dolphins. There's talk of Miami Dolphins. Are they set at quarterback with Tua? He's been there 12 months. He's been there 10 months. And they're already there's talk about, have we seen his best work? There's no patience anymore. I think they've actually been a little patient with Drew Lock. What is their draft pick? I think they're in the 13.
Number 9.
Ooh, 9, you're really close. 9, you're a first-round draft pick away from being the 5th pick of the draft. So if I were betting, I think they would draft a quarterback.
Mark, have you got one more for Paul before we go?
Yeah, so, actually, Paul, you said about not having patience there. Sam Darnold at 23 in New York Jets territory is another one in that, although obviously since his infamous seeing ghosts comment, I think he's got a perception battle's come back from. I suppose I'm going to finish with just a pop quiz question. We might as well end with a bit of trivia and everything. So I feel like we're in the almost the quarterback kind of emotional support group at the moment here. You've got Andy Dalton, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Cam Newton as the starters for our 4 teams, none of which excites anyone except Brian, who still believes Daniel Jones is an actual functioning NFL quarterback. But that's beside the point. Pop quiz, I'm going to do Dennis Hopper in speed. So pop quiz, hotshot. There are 3 teams in the NFL currently who have a quarterback, or quarterbacks, shall we say, who have 4+ Pro Bowls and 1 Super Bowl MVP between them. I know there's one man on this call who definitely knows the answer to that, but I'm wondering if the other 3 do. No, just waiting. Paul, you might have to put them out of their misery.
Well, I'm going to give you a hint. We've talked about him a lot in the past hour. One of them.
Russell Wilson? No. No.
Mr. Dalton.
Tom Brady. The Buccaneers have quarterbacks with 4 Pro Bowls and an MVP. The Green Bay Packers have quarterbacks with 4 Pro Bowls and MVP. And my Chicago Bears with Andy Dalton and Nick
Foles.
And Nick Foles. Nick Foles has the MVP and 1 Pro Bowl. Andy Dalton. Now I had to put them together into 1 decent quarterback. But do the math. That's Hall of Fame right there. Those 2 guys could go in the Hall of Fame together. 1 butt, split it in the middle, red hair on this side, long face on the other for Foles.
Paul, can I just say, man, just before we go, when this COVID stuff stops, you're booking a flight one way in New York to Dublin, and we're going to have some scoops in the Guinness factory and also in a couple of bars in the north, maybe in some random villages as well. I have to say as well, if Dan, yourself, Todd, Patrick, or McLovin ever need a day off, we're happy to fill in, but we massively appreciate your time. We ask everybody here, seriously, if you're in Ireland, UK, Europe, check out the Dan Patrick Show, some fantastic content. Paul, the amount of time that you've made for us. Thanks a million for your time. We massively appreciate it. Hope you enjoy your St. Patrick's Day because you're 4 hours behind us, so you have more time to have a few scoops, as I call them here. But
thank you guys
for coming on, Paul.
I love coming to Ireland. I really want to get back there again as soon as I can. Like, it's so easy too. Like, if you live on the East Coast, you could take that Wednesday or Thursday night flight, and you wake up in Ireland and get off the plane. I may have an open tab at O'Donoghue's near Marion Street in Dublin that I got to close.
Yeah.
And I need to go back to Matt the Treasure, the seafood place, also in Dublin, because that's some good seafood. So there's a lot of places I got to get back to.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Thank you for having me on. Take care, guys.
Yeah, and look, we'll not leave it until the Super Bowl next year. We'll have you on again soon. Thanks for your time, man, and see you soon.
All time.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.